Rachel Monroe stood frozen in the middle of JFK International Airport, her neatly packed suitcase beside her, the hum of excited travelers filling the air. Just minutes ago, she had been filled with anticipation, ready to board her long-awaited flight to Venice, Italy, where she was supposed to meet her parents and younger sister for a long-overdue family vacation. But now, as she held her phone to her ear, listening to her mother's sickly sweet voice, everything came crashing down. "Sweetheart, why didn't you board yesterday? We've been waiting." The words sent a chill through her. Rachel pulled the phone away for a moment, staring at the screen as if it had betrayed her too. Yesterday? That couldn't be right. She had triple-checked her flight details, all carefully arranged by her parents. The flight was today. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through her messages. There it was, in plain text from her mother just last week. "Flight is on the 18th at 3 p.m. Don't be late." But as her mother continued speaking, her casual tone made Rachel's stomach turn. "Oh, sweetie, there must have been some confusion. But don't worry, we're already settled in at the hotel. Your sister made it just fine." Rachel's grip on her suitcase tightened, her pulse roaring in her ears. Emily had made it just fine? Of course she had. Emily was always their priority. Rachel forced herself to take a steadying breath. "What do you mean, yesterday?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "You told me the flight was today at 3. I have the messages to prove it." Her mother sighed, the kind of exasperated sigh that had haunted Rachel's childhood whenever she dared to question something. "Sweetheart, don't be dramatic. These things happen." Rachel felt the world tilt slightly. No, they didn't just happen. Not by accident, not when she had been the one to send her parents money last week to help with the trip expenses, thinking this was finally her chance to reconnect with them. The truth settled over her like a suffocating weight. This was deliberate. They had planned this. They had lied. A flash of pain burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let the tears fall. Around her, families laughed, couples hurried to catch their flights, children held their parents' hands in excitement, but Rachel stood alone, feeling like a fool. She had trusted them, trusted that, for once, she was part of the family, not just the one who paid for their comfort, and yet they had happily taken her money, booked their own flights, and left her behind without a second thought. A new message lit up her phone. It was from Emily, a photo of her and their parents sitting at a sunny cafe in Venice, glasses of wine in hand. "Family trip begins. Wish you were here, Rach." The anger hit like a tidal wave. They didn't forget her. They had excluded her on purpose. And as Rachel stood in the airport, she made a decision that would change everything. She was done being their safety net. Rachel Monroe had always been the responsible one. While her younger sister Emily floated through life on the wings of their parents' unwavering support, Rachel had been left to navigate the storm alone. From an early age, she understood that her role in the family wasn't to be cherished or celebrated. It was to provide, to fix, to sacrifice. Their parents had doted on Emily, funding her every artistic whim, from expensive private tutors to costly out-of-state workshops, all in the name of supporting her dreams. Meanwhile, Rachel had worked tirelessly, putting herself through business school, landing a high-stress job as a financial consultant, and ensuring she never became a burden to anyone. But no matter how much she achieved, how hard she worked, it was never enough to earn the same love and attention that Emily received so effortlessly. The financial burden had started small, a few $100s here covering a bill there. Then, when their father retired early due to stress, Rachel was suddenly expected to help with their mortgage, pay for unexpected medical bills, and cover their living expenses. "You're doing so well," her mother had often reminded her, the words coated in false praise. "It's only fair you help the family." And so she had. For years, Rachel sent them money without hesitation, even when it meant putting her own dreams on hold. She had been saving for a down payment on a house, a goal she had worked towards since her mid-20s. But each time she neared that milestone, another emergency would arise. Emily's new art exhibition, their parents' home repairs, a sudden trip they just couldn't afford on their own. When her parents had announced the family vacation to Venice, Rachel had been thrilled, foolishly believing this was their way of finally including her. For once, it wasn't just about what she could do for them. It was about spending time together. So, when her mother insisted they handle all the bookings, claiming their father had airline miles to use, Rachel didn't question it. She even sent $4,000 extra to help with resort expenses, wanting the trip to be special. But standing there in the airport, staring at the text message of their smiling faces in Venice, she finally understood. This wasn't an accident. It was the final proof that she had never truly been part of their family, only their financial safety net. And she was done. Rachel stared at the photo on her phone, her family basking in the warm glow of a Venetian cafe, sipping wine, looking carefree and content without her. The caption from Emily, "Wish you were here, Rach," felt like a cruel joke. They had taken her money, booked this vacation, and left her behind. The weight of years of sacrifice pressed down on her chest. But this time, the pain wasn't just disappointment, it was rage. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, her mind racing back over every time she had put them first. Every moment she had ignored the nagging voice in her head that whispered, "They only love what you do for them, not you." Her phone rang again. Her father. Rachel clenched her jaw but answered, her voice sharp. "Why did you lie to me?" The other end of the line went silent for a beat before he sighed heavily, the same patronizing sigh he used whenever she called him out. "Rachel, let's not make a scene," he said. "It was just a mix-up. These things happen." Her anger boiled over. "No, Dad, these things don't just happen," she snapped. "I have the texts. You told me the flight was today. You knew exactly what you were doing." Another pause, then a dismissive chuckle. "Sweetheart, you're overreacting. You've been working so hard, maybe this is for the best. You can take some time to relax at home." Rachel's grip on her phone tightened. Relax at home? After she had paid thousands of dollars for a vacation she wasn't even invited to? She took a deep breath, her voice now eerily calm. "Did you even plan to tell me? Or was I just supposed to figure it out when I showed up at the airport?" Her father's tone hardened. "Rachel, don't be ungrateful. Your sister needed this trip. She's been under a lot of stress, and we didn't want any unnecessary tension." There it was, the truth. Emily's happiness came first, always. Rachel felt her pulse pounding in her ears. "Unnecessary tension?" she echoed bitterly. "You mean me. You didn't want me there. You wanted my money, but not me." Her father scoffed. "That's a ridiculous thing to say." Rachel laughed coldly, the sound foreign even to her own ears. "You know what's ridiculous, Dad? The fact that I just checked my bank account. I sent you $4,000 last week for this trip. You took my money, knowing you were going to leave me behind." Silence. A long, damning silence. Then, finally, his voice softened. "Rachel, you know we're on a fixed income. We needed that money to cover the trip." Something in Rachel snapped, not just at the betrayal, but at the fact that he wasn't even sorry. "You're right, Dad," she said, her voice steady, "but you won't have to worry about that anymore." And with that, she hung up. The bank of Rachel Monroe was officially closed. Rachel sat in her car outside Aunt Linda's house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She had spent the last hour replaying the conversation with her father, each word etching itself deeper into her mind. "You know we're on a fixed income. We needed that money." He had said it so casually, like she was nothing more than an ATM. But something about the way he had spoken, his quick defensiveness, his refusal to apologize, left a sick feeling in her gut. How much had they really taken from her? Inside, Aunt Linda welcomed her with a knowing look, as if she had been expecting this moment for years. "I was wondering when you'd finally see it," she said, pouring Rachel a cup of tea. "Your parents have been using you for a long time, sweetheart." Rachel swallowed hard. "I just found out they lied about the vacation, and I transferred them thousands of dollars for a trip I wasn't even invited to," she admitted. "But I can't shake the feeling that there's more." Aunt Linda sighed and disappeared into the other room, returning with a folder filled with documents. "I did some digging after your dad asked me for a loan last year," she explained, sliding a few pages in front of Rachel. "And I think you need to see this." Rachel's stomach twisted as she read the first document, a credit card statement in her name. But the charges weren't hers. luxury department stores, first-class flights, expensive dinners. The total balance? $130,000. Her hands shook as she flipped to the next document, a loan application, also in her name, with her forged signature. Her breath caught in her throat. Identity theft? They opened a credit line under my name? Rachel's voice cracked. They stole from me? Aunt Linda nodded solemnly. They've been living well beyond their means, and they've been using you to do it. Emily's art classes, the home renovations, that wasn't their savings, it was your money. Rachel's pulse pounded in her ears. The years of guilt, the sacrifices, the time she had skipped vacations, held off on buying a home, worked overtime. It was never enough. Because they weren't just bad with money, they were thieves. She grabbed her phone, pulling up her banking app. If they had done this once, what else had they done? She quickly navigated to her credit report, her heart sinking as the page loaded. Multiple open accounts, loans she had never applied for, charges she had never made. Tears burned at the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This isn't just financial abuse, Linda. This is a crime. Aunt Linda reached across the table, squeezing Rachel's trembling hand. I know. And now you have to decide what you're going to do about it. Rachel inhaled sharply. She knew exactly what she was going to do. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was war. Rachel sat at Aunt Linda's dining table, the folder of evidence in front of her like a loaded weapon. Her parents and Emily were due any minute, summoned under the pretense of a family discussion. But Rachel wasn't here to discuss. She was here to expose the truth. Her hands tightened into fists as she heard the front door open, followed by the sound of her mother's overly cheerful voice. There's my girl, Margaret Monroe cooed, stepping inside like nothing had happened. Oh, sweetheart, I hope you're not still upset about the mix-up with the flights. Rachel held up a hand. Sit down, she said coldly. Her father, Richard, scowled, but took a seat beside her mother. Emily hesitated, sensing the tension. What's all this about? Richard asked. His tone clipped. Rachel slid the folder across the table and folded her arms. Why don't you tell me? Her mother opened the folder, her face draining of color as she skimmed the documents. Where did you get this? She whispered. Aunt Linda did some digging, Rachel said, her voice like steel. That's a credit card statement in my name. But I didn't open that account, did I? Emily peered over their mother's shoulder, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. Wait, what? She murmured. Rachel leaned forward, her voice dangerously calm. It gets better. There's also a loan application for $130,000 that I never signed. You stole my identity. That's fraud. Her father's face darkened. Now, hold on. No, Rachel cut him off. You hold on. You've been using me as your personal bank for years, but this is a crime. Margaret's lip quivered. Sweetheart, we were going to tell you when, Rachel snapped. After you maxed out every credit line in my name, after you drained me dry? She turned to Emily, who was still staring in disbelief. Did you know about this? Emily shook her head, looking at their parents. You told me Rachel refused to help me with my tuition, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel let out a bitter laugh. Of course they did. Just like they told me you needed money for art school when you weren't even enrolled. Emily's face crumpled as she turned to their mother. You lied to me? Margaret sniffled dramatically. Oh, stop being so dramatic. We did what we had to do. We're your parents, Rachel. We raised you. We gave you everything. Rachel's blood ran cold. Everything? You didn't give me anything, she seethed. I put myself through college. I paid for your house. I've worked my ass off while you funneled money into Emily's dreams and treated me like your personal ATM. Richard slammed his hand on the table. Enough! You don't talk to your mother like that. Money has made you selfish, Rachel. You don't understand what it means to make sacrifices for family. Rachel stared at him, her anger morphing into something sharper. Resolve. No, Dad, I do understand sacrifices. I've spent my entire life making them for you. But this, she pointed to the folder, this is theft. Her father's jaw tightened. What do you want? Rachel pulled out a repayment agreement her lawyer had drafted. Sign this. Every penny you stole gets paid back. I'm closing every shared account, freezing my credit. And if you ever try something like this again, I will press charges. Mm? Margaret paled. You wouldn't. I would, Rachel said without hesitation, because unlike you, I'm done lying. Richard's shoulders slumped. He knew he had lost. One by one, they signed. Rachel gathered the papers and stood, her heart pounding. But for the first time in years, she felt free. Rachel left Aunt Linda's house that evening, feeling lighter than she had in years. As she stepped into the cold night air, the weight of her family's manipulation began to lift, replaced by a new, unfamiliar sense of clarity. She was free. Free from their demands, their guilt trips, their constant siphoning of her hard-earned money. For the first time, she was choosing herself. The next morning, she took action. She called her bank, froze her credit, and closed every shared account. Then, she reached out to her company's HR department to remove her parents as beneficiaries from her insurance policies. Each step felt like peeling away layers of obligation that had bound her for years. She had always been their safety net, their emergency fund, their backup plan. But no more. The bank of Rachel Monroe was officially closed. The messages started soon after. First from her mother, "Sweetheart, I can't sleep knowing you're angry. We're family. We need to talk." Then from her father, "We raised you better than this. Your mother is in tears. Is that what you wanted?" Rachel ignored them. The final message came from Emily. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry." Unlike their parents, Emily seemed genuinely remorseful. A week later, Emily called. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said quietly, "but I see everything now. They lied to both of us." There was something in her voice, shame, regret, maybe even an understanding of what Rachel had endured for years. "I know I don't deserve another chance," Emily admitted, "but if you're willing, I'd like to start over." Rachel hesitated, then exhaled. Maybe, just maybe, Emily wasn't the enemy. Their parents had played them against each other for years, making Emily believe Rachel was selfish while convincing Rachel that Emily was helpless. But the truth was, they had both been used. "Let's take it slow," Rachel finally said. She wasn't ready to rebuild everything, but she was willing to try. As for her parents, she had nothing left to give. They had made their choices, and now, for the first time in her life, Rachel was making hers. 3 months later, Rachel stood barefoot on the warm sands of Santorini, Greece, the sun casting golden reflections over the rippling waves. The salty breeze kissed her skin as she sipped a glass of chilled white wine, watching the sky burn with hues of orange and pink. This was the trip she had always dreamed of. One she had paid for herself, with no guilt, no obligations, and no strings attached. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from Emily. "I hope you're enjoying Greece. When you're back, maybe we can grab coffee?" Rachel smiled slightly. She wasn't sure what the future held for her and Emily, but at least now it would be on her terms. As she took another deep breath, she realized something. For the first time in her life, she wasn't carrying the weight of anyone else's expectations. No more exhausting herself to prove her worth. No more sacrificing her own dreams for the comfort of others. She was free. And as she watched the last sliver of the sun disappear below the horizon, she knew this was only the beginning. Rachel's journey teaches a powerful lesson. Self-sacrifice should never come at the cost of self-respect. For years, she believed that being a good daughter meant providing, fixing, and giving even when it hurt her. She worked tirelessly, put her dreams on hold, and poured her hard-earned money into a family that saw her as a resource rather than a loved one. But love is not measured by how much you can give, nor should family loyalty be built on financial obligation. Her story reminds us that setting boundaries is not selfish, it's necessary. Rachel learned that people who truly care for you will respect your limits, not manipulate you into breaking them. Cutting ties with toxic relationships, even family, is sometimes the only way to reclaim your own life. In choosing herself, Rachel didn't just free herself from financial burden, she freed herself emotionally. The hardest lesson of all: you can love people and still walk away from them. Forgiveness is a choice, but trust must be earned. And sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to close the door on those who never valued you beyond what you could provide. Freedom is the true reward.